Hell yeah, brother. Still working on the Chinkapin oak acorns. So far, these are my favorite because the kernels just fall away from those really easy. But I'm doing something a little bit different than the last couple of times because I'm going to start them out in a big mortar and pestle because I just get too annoyed with this shallow one when they're still entire like this. They kind of fly all over the place when I smash them. So since this is so deep, it'll prevent a lot from flying out. And then I'll move them over to the stone one to do the finer grinding steps. Redo that for the camera. What's up, y'all? Yeah, I like doing it in this deep mortar first because you can see how far they fly out. What up, y'all? Dang. Keep trying to escape. How long do you have to leave them out to dry? they kind of change color. If you're leaving them out, it really just depends on the conditions. If it's not very humid and it's pretty warm, like in Texas, you can leave them out in a single layer for a few days. Is usually enough. And actually some acorns they change color, like the live oak ones will change from green to brown when they're dry. If the conditions are more wet and humid, it could take a couple weeks, but it's a huge amount of variation. You can also use a dehydrator, and that'll dry them out in just like 24 hours, or you can even throw them in the oven as low as it will go, under 200 degrees. At 200 degrees is at the highest, and then that'll dry them out in like a couple hours, or maybe like 4 or 5 hours. But if you're not sure, you can always test it out and crack them open, and they'll feel wet if they're not completely dry, and they'll be nice and crisp when you try to break them if they are fully dry. But them being dry is pretty important to get a good grind on them. Otherwise, you're just kind of mushing them together, and you're not going to get that fine powder you're looking for. Did I make the pestle? Yes, I made the mortar and the pestle. This was actually just a stout mesquite branch, and I didn't use stone tools to make this, but I think I have a kukri, which is kind of like a machete, but it has a curve to it. Just grab both sides of that and use it as a draw knife. I mean, I have a draw knife, but I just use that to debark it, essentially, and then shape the ends to be a nice sort of profile where it's kind of flat but also curves out a bit towards the side. And mesquite's good because it's a really hard wood, especially the heartwood. I don't know if you can tell because there's so much acorn meal in it now, but most of this is heartwood, which is a reddish color. The outer part is a yellow sapwood, and so it makes a nice pestle. It's also pretty heavy wood. And the mortar is made out of just a trunk of willow. So this is what you're seeing is just directly underneath the bark. There's even some pieces of the inner bark lingering. And I also cut this down with a kukri, basically a machete. And then I have a folding saw. And then I had to use some gouge chisels to chisel it out. Use this as a mallet. You pound in the chisel, but historically the mortar would have been made by burning and then scraping. Kind of a tedious process, but basically you set a fire, and say this was a trunk or the top of a log, set a fire in the center, and then you keep it burning by blowing on it, especially if you have a straw or a tube, blow to ignite the embers, and that burns down a bit, and then after a while it's gonna kind of stop burning because it's all just so charred. And at that point you scrape it out with some stone tools or something. And then once you've exposed some more fresh wood, you reignite it and continue burning. And you can control the area of where that's burning by using mud to protect the wood, say on the edges here. That's actually the way trees were historically cut down as well, by burning and protecting areas with mud. But yeah, both together probably took, I don't know, 8 hours of work. Most of it was carving out the center of this because it needed to be very deep. I initially made it for mesquite beans. Those are huge. Film with the second camera here, by the way. Trying to get a good angle down into the mortar. There we go. That's nice. Maybe even closer. You can just see the camera. Too close. There we go. might rain. Just got a gust of wind with some heavy with that rain smell. Clouds have been kind of dark all day, but sort of cold wind with the smell of rain on it. Well, I'll wait till it does. Thanks for joining. I think at this point, it's a good stage to move them over to the stone, because this big wooden pestle is good for grinding them from whole to chunks, but it's not good at grinding them up real fine. But that was a nice way to start them out. And I think I'll just do a little handful or so at a time here, and then I'll kind of have a rotation of, as I get the finer particles, I'll sift those out. This way. Here's my stone mortar. I made this in the last live. Looks like a mess, but that helps it sit flush on the rock and gives it some stability. I'm actually cooking up some more pitch because I wanted to fortify this. Actually, let me check on that because I got a fire going. I'll bring that over here. So this is just melted pine pitch and beeswax, but at least twice the amount of beeswax is pine pitch. And to it, I'll be adding about an equal amount of powdered charcoal. Stop that. This is the life of a Paleolithic person, spending all day just smashing stuff. Isn't it awesome? No, actually, historical research has shown, and ethnographic research has shown, that hunter-gatherer societies worked far less than modern people do, about 20 hours a week. And your work is like hunting and fishing and foraging and working on cool crafts, stuff people do nowadays in their free time. One of the many common misconceptions about life in the Paleolithic, people also didn't die at age 30 or some ridiculous stuff. People are always saying stuff like that. The average age expectancy was lower, but that's because it is heavily skewed by infant mortality. Once you reach age, 2 or 3, you're pretty much, life expectancy at that point is like 80, just around nowadays, and people could have also lived for a lot longer. People had very, very good health, especially dental health, which is a high cause of mortality in like the early industrial ages. You heard those common misconceptions? Yeah. Everyone believes that sort of thing. And those same people will be working 50 hours and have all sorts of health problems. So, this is pretty rough stuff. I need to sort it out here. I can put it in this, and out some of that. Those big chunks. Basket. Maybe I'll do it this first. Ooh, that wind really kicked up just 10 minutes ago. Must be a storm coming. Just a little charcoal dust in the eyes. Perfectly healthy. And I add that to the melted pine pitch and beeswax. I kind of wish I had a little brush to paint this on, but I'll just do it with this stick. I'll wait till it gets a little thicker. I need it to cool down and be a little bit more viscous. I'm just going to go ahead and start grinding. It's a limestone mortar. Oh, I didn't. Yeah, true. You have like that high population density, especially in close proximity to a lot of livestock. It's just a breeding ground for diseases, and trying to feed everyone on bread is not the healthiest way to live. Plus, being in confined spaces with a lot of wood smoke still from the fires. Yeah, that's true. Everyone thinks we're at the highest advancement now, but it's true in some ways. Like, it's easier for us to create calories for people than ever before. It's more very efficient, and obviously there's all sorts of technology and stuff, but it's just like, what is the point of doing all that if the average person still has to work an insane amount of hours and still can't even afford a place to live, and are struggling to feed themselves? What is the point of having these very efficient systems that aren't paying off for the average person? It's really messed up. One problem is just the consumers and just people. There's so much stuff to want now. People are having to meet those needs, and then there's a lot of stuff that's baked in. You can't even live without a car nowadays, the way society is set up, and just a lot of baseline things that is just a continuous you need to pay for. Of course, like rent and housing. Wow, that wind really kicked in. Yeah, if you live in a Paleolithic society, hunter-gatherers, you don't really have to worry about anything. All you do is just like go out and try to hunt or fish, make some food happen, build up some stores. Around this time of year, it'd be a lot of acorn processing, building up your stores with acorns and just going home and hanging out with the local community and having like cool like festivals and dances and feasts and cool like little rituals and stuff, and living the dream. The first person who planted stuff is a fool. Should have stopped him. We're all living in the Garden of Eden. The knowledge that was ate upon was the knowledge of agriculture and metallurgy. Now we're cursed. True, yeah. When you have a lot of free time, you're probably going to end up in a lot of quarrels. People also like to kind of overstate the amount of violent conflict and indigenous peoples just throughout the world, but in particular the American Indians, because I feel like it's kind of like a defensive thing. But yes, there was certainly plenty of bloody conflict, but it was nothing compared to what was going on in like medieval Europe. The casualty rates in those conflicts were really, really low. So basically, there were a few different types of combat, or what would you call them? Violent battles. Some would be sort of territorial disputes, in which it was more like a ritualistic combat. You'd be basically like confronting two groups from two tribes would be confronting one another, and they would be like firing shots at one another with a bow and arrow. And then like basically as soon as anyone got shot, they would be like, okay, well, we're gonna go home, but we're still mad at y'all. And it's just kind of a perpetual thing. Another type would be the raid, and not all societies practice either of these, but the raiding was pretty prominent among Plains tribes. Comanche, that's like their whole way of living. But in the raid, they sought to do a surprise attack upon their enemies, or really just anyone, and they would seek to just do as much damage as they could in a short amount of time and make off with whatever goods that they could in a short amount of time, and have basically no casualties. And if there was a single casualty, they would immediately retreat. And this is also seen in people like the Yanomamo in Brazil, just indigenous cultures all around the world. In Papua New Guinea, and this is sort of the same pattern. So yeah, you do have a sort of frequent, kind of constant, but very low level, low impact violent disputes. But then you have like the medieval wars in Europe, where you have like the peasants conscripted to go out and fight in giant formations and be killed by the thousands just regularly, just brutally slaughtering massive numbers. And you can see a really big difference in the cultures when the Spanish came and were just wrecking havoc in the southeast, because the Spanish had just come out of the 100 Years' War, and so their whole culture, the people they sent for the expedition, their whole livelihood has been based around that style of conflict, which is just very brutal siege warfare with high casualties. And the natives were not doing that. They were not prepared to deal with that. And it wasn't really so much, they were mainly just surprised by that sort of the willingness of the Europeans to die in battle. And the Spanish kind of saw the opposite. The Spanish were like, they're like refused to press their advantage. Hernando de Soto said that very prominently about Southeast natives. He basically said that they could have won. They could have easily been defeated, the Spanish party, many times, if only the natives had pressed their advantage. By that he meant allowing casualties by like pushing forward. But they were like, he was like, as soon as like a few people died, they were like, okay, we're retreating, we're done with. So it's a very interesting difference. Some parallels between plains people and Eurasian steppe people, smooth flat landscape. Yeah, that's true. It's interesting. It's kind of a convergent evolution of culture there, especially when the horse came, and a lot of the plains tribes sort of used that. I think, yeah, just having the open space and the horses sort of sets it up for that being an advantageous lifestyle. But yeah, I've read a lot about the Yamnaya and those other people in the bell beaker culture. I'm not sure those are related. But yeah, there's people in the Eastern Europe or Western Eurasia plains. Okay, what am I doing? I need to put this into this. And then first I need to wipe this off. Yeah, 100 years, that seems about a reasonable maximum limit. I mean, I know people have lived beyond that, but it's a good goal to shoot for. This technique is based on my research of California natives and their acorn processing methods. Basically everything I'm doing here is based off of my research on California natives' use of acorns, which there's a lot of good research on that. And acorns constitute about 50% of their diet, or about every other calorie came from acorns throughout the year. So sorting out the larger particles, and I'm only going to keep the finer ones so that remain in the weave of the basket. I'll show you how I take those out. But I'm trying to work these last ones in there, around the edge. There we go. Oops. Don't want to lose too much in this wind, it sure is. And this is the already fine meal, so we put that upside down. And then a good tapping stick. No, let's use a better one. this stuff I'll continue to grind. Yeah, Texas has 50 species of oaks roundabouts, but it is the oak genus Quercus is the 5th most speciose genus of vascular plants in all of Texas. So there's only 5 other plant genera that have more species in them than oaks. So that's like pretty huge. I mean, there's a ton of oaks all over North America, but I think Texas in particular has a ton because we have both the southeastern flora and the southwestern flora, as well as the plains flora, and even a little bit of the Rocky Mountains flora, represented by like the Davis Mountains and Big Bend area, mostly Davis Mountains. And then even down into the South Texas, that's kind of some unique stuff that's mostly just in northern Mexico. So it's a huge variety of ecoregions that is allowing us to have so many oak species. There's a lot of hybridization too in the Quercus genus. For example, the Quercus fumiformis, the escarpment live oak, is, I mean, it's its own species. It's an accepted scientific name, but it's essentially the same thing as Quercus virginiana, and they fully interbreed. So it's basically just the escarpment live oaks are on the escarpment, and are smaller and scrubbier. But I mean, if you took the live oak for Quercus virginiana and planted it in the escarpment, it would probably look pretty much identical to Quercus fusiformis. So I'm not sure if there's much of genetic data separating the two species, but that's a problem with species. There's always gray areas. People think of species as very clear cut and black and white, but it's not always. Bitterness or flavor? Yeah, definitely. Certain ones have a lot of differences in bitterness and flavor. So that's one thing that I'm wanting to work on this fall, is to really determine what's the best species overall for using. Because I have this Texas red oak. Its acorn's like a lot bigger than the escarpment live oak, but that's not a good example. Usually this is kind of like the average difference between those two. So like twice the size, but they are more bitter. But yeah, that's real bitter. But these are already pretty bitter. But the chinkapin oak, the ones I'm grinding up right now, I don't have any to show you, but here's the shells of that. Those actually hardly need any leaching at all, and they taste like this stuff already tastes sweet, and there's like no bitter aftertaste. So far this is my favorite. There's also the bur oak, which is it's a huge kernel, but it's kind of intermediate bitterness. This chinkapin oak is very sweet. I'm kind of wanting to go gather more, because previously I was doing more like the bur oak and the live oak. I'm trying to get more of the red oak and the chinkapin oak. But all oak acorns are edible, but most of them need to process to leach out the tannins. But some of them you don't really need to, or it's very light leaching is necessary. But I would say pretty much everyone could benefit from at least one round of leaching. And some of them you need like 5 rounds of leaching to get all the tannins out. But I need to take a bathroom break. go, man. Thanks. He's about ready to sort the big chunks again. Oh man, one thing I really hate about living in the city is having those planes fly overhead constantly. Actually, didn't seem to notice as much until I started recording videos. And then every time I rewatched the video or was editing it, the sound of the planes flying over is very prominent. It's easy to just sort of, I guess, block out if you're hearing it all the time. But I've become conscious of them every time now. And boy, are they loud. Traffic noise, too. Whenever I'm out in the country, it's so nice to be around just complete silence. I feel like there's some sort of baseline stress that it must be causing everyone who lives in cities. So let's empty this out. I actually want to try this different mortar, pestle. and like the wind's kicking up and blowing stuff around, so I don't want to grind up anymore. Acorn meal and have it blow away. I'm just gonna end the stream there, but thanks everyone for watching. Take it easy.